Alright, so we're going to jump into 3.1 and 3.2 today. So 3.1 is talking about Introduction to Data Collection. So we're going to talk about a valid statistical question that would have answers and data that varies, okay? With this, we got to think about three important things. We got to think about population, sample, and census. So population is talking about the entire group, as to where a sample is talking about a part of the group. And then your census is the data from everyone in the group. So remember those three things. You got to know about population, sample, and census. Again, the big thing to take away is your population is the entire group. That's where a sample is a part of the group. So population is like all the students at the high school, all high school students. And then a sample, you can say, I'm going to take a sample, I'm going to look at taking all the juniors. So the juniors would be your sample. Your population would be all the high school students. So think of it that way. Then we're going to talk about an observational survey or experimental survey, in which case observational is no treatment, you just collect data. So no treatment is imposed, just collect the data. As to where experiment, you impose a treatment. Then we're going to go to 3.2, sampling good and bad. So we're going to talk about three ways of sample. You got your convenient sample, your voluntary response, and then your random sample. So convenient sample is choosing people who are easy to reach. So if you want to stand outside Starbucks and ask them, everybody walks out the front door, ask them if they like coffee. Well, that's a convenient sample, right? You're right there. People who like coffee are probably going to Starbucks. Your voluntary response is people volunteer to call in, write in, vote online, etc. So things about, like on the radio, people say, call in if you like this song, or call in if you want to go here or do this or that. Or when you get those texts that I'm pretty sure if you're getting them as well, but those texts talking about who you're voting for, who's going to be the next president, things like that. So there's a voluntary response. You do not have to reply. And then you have the random sample. Use random chance to pick people. So it is randomly going about picking people, random selection, okay? So the first two, convenient sample and voluntary response, have a bias, constantly over or underestimate the truth, all right? Because convenience, of course, as far as it's convenient, right? For those people coming out of Starbucks that like coffee, and you want to know if they like coffee, right? So there's a bit of a bias there. And voluntary response, to where if people are asked a question, more than likely only people who really want to reply are going to reply. So if you hear a question on the radio and they say, hey, do you like this band? Well, more than likely, only people who are going to reply and feel the need to call in or text or send a tweet or whatever the case may be are going to be the people that like that band. So therefore, there is a bias to convenient sample and voluntary response. As to where a random sample, if you're just doing a random number generator to pick a number from a population and go about your business, there's no bias in that because there's nothing pointing towards those individuals. It's just a random pull out of the hat. Okay, so let's go into this. So we're going to go over this check your understanding. I'll work through this the best way to explain through it. All right, so dealing with 3.1, researchers at Columbia University randomly selected 1,000 teenagers in the United States for a survey. According to an ABC News article about the research, teenagers who eat with their families at least 5 times a week are more likely to get better grades in school. So the question here is, what is the statistical question that the researchers were trying to answer? Well, if you think about it, for the teenagers, you want to know, is there an association between frequency of eating dinner with their family and their grades in school? So the question they're asking is eating dinner with your family going to improve the student's grades? Then let's think about the population and the sample. So what do you think your population is? It says right up here, United States. All right, for a survey, and they're talking about teenagers. So hopefully you see that population is all teens in the U.S. So then what's your sample? Where do they say they're taking their sample from? So the sample, you should have seen, was 1,000 teenagers, right? Out of all the people in the United States, or all the teenagers in the United States, they're taking 1,000 of them to survey them. Is this an observational study or an experiment? And then explain to me why you think it is what it is. So this is going to be an observational study. there were not any treatments imposed on the teenagers. They weren't saying, hey, you must eat this every night, and we're going to see if that determines if you get better grades. They didn't say you have to eat on this day, and this day to make it work, right? They didn't give a specific direction or anything else. They just want to know observationally if this is working. And that's kind of 3.1 in a nutshell. So it's pretty straightforward. The big thing is you think about those big ideas that we discussed. And really think about the overall picture of things and dealing with your population and your sample for the most part. So dealing with 3.2, sampling good and bad. So in June 2008, Parade magazine posed the following question. Should drivers be banned from using all cell phones? Readers were encouraged to vote online at that website. The July 13, 2008 issue of Parade reports the results, that 85% said yes and 15% said no. So what type of sample did Parade's survey obtain? So is it going to be a convenience, a voluntary, or a random sample? So it should have been a voluntary response, right? Because they didn't say that everybody has to answer. They just asked, should drivers be banned from using all cell phones? And in a magazine, right? It's like the same thing as if they were due over the radio or through the TV or somewhere on the internet, right? So the readers selected themselves to vote online. They didn't say they had to, it was voluntary. So why is this sampling method biased? Well, hopefully when you think about it, you can see that only people who feel strongly about changing the law will voluntarily respond, right? Only people who are against people driving and using cell phones. People who feel current laws are adequate are unlikely to spend the time to vote online. So if you really don't care and you use your cell phone on the road and whatnot, you're probably not going to call in and say that you're for it or against it. You don't really care about it. But those who are truly against it, those are the ones that voice their opinion and call in and vote. So is 85% likely to be greater than or less than the percent of all adults who believe that cell phone use while driving should be banned? Well, hopefully you felt that it would be greater than, because those who feel strongly about changing the law are more likely to vote. We just mentioned that, right? So if you really are against people using their cell phones, you're going to call in and vote. So that's why 85%. If they did one for everybody had to submit, I guarantee that number would be a lot lower. So explain how Parade magazine could avoid the bias described above. So what do you think they could have done differently in their sampling? Well, instead of asking for volunteers, the magazine could have taken a random sample. They could have actually sent a reporter out and asked random people that they walked around town or while they're sitting in some location, right? So therefore they could get a random sample of people and see the true scope, maybe kind of how it plays out. Because more than likely, that number wouldn't be as high at all. So again, think about those big ideas as far as population, sample, and census. And think about the three types of samples. You got your convenient sample, you got your random sample, and then you got your voluntary response. So convenience is where the person is located, where it's going to benefit them, okay? And voluntary is going to be just asking a question. Anybody who wants to answer can answer. And then a random sample. So a random sample is going to be taking just random people's names out of a hat, or doing a random number generator to generate numbers and just labeling everybody with a number in a population, and therefore picking random people from that population and moving forward with it. Hope that explained things a little bit easier for you. I'll see you next time.